Dishonesty threads through every domain of human society, from whispers in private conversations to sweeping manipulations that reshape political or economic landscapes. Despite this sprawling reach, many individuals only grapple with the nature of lies as needed. They encounter falsehood in a painful personal betrayal, or glimpse it indirectly through the unraveling of a public scandal. Yet deception is neither rare nor peripheral. It courses through history and culture with a potency that begs ongoing study. Mythological depictions of tricksters reveal how societies have long recognized and dramatized the potential benefits and perils of deceit. The trickster archetype, whether called by a name in the stories of ancient Europe, the folklore of Africa, the wisdom tales of Asia, or elsewhere, embodies cunning, subversion, and creative forms of rule-bending. Often, this figure is not purely evil. Instead, the trickster might help mortals learn humility or reveal the vanity of a ruler who believes in his invincibility. Yet the trickster may also wreak havoc with only the slightest concern for the suffering of others, thus underscoring the ambivalence societies feel toward dishonesty.
Hey, I declare I don't know what's got into you.
You heard your mother, Thomas. Now do as she says.
Finally, his folks sent him to see me. There wasn't anything physically wrong with him that I could find, so I began to talk with him. If you've got something on your mind, Tommy, why don't you talk about it?
Well,
We all have our problems, Tommy.
But I can talk about it.
Of course you can. And you know something?
These legends echo in modern narratives, from literary fiction to cinematic tales, reminding us that deception grips the imagination precisely because it both enthralls and destroys. Origins of the trickster, cultural foundations. Early peoples lived in tight-knit groups that depended on cooperation and communal bonds for survival. Within those groups, trust was paramount. One needed to rely on a hunting partner's honesty about the location of prey, for example, or on the sincerity of promises made between families. Yet there existed a place in cultural consciousness for the cunning deceiver as well. Oral traditions carried accounts of individuals or spirits that lied to trick their foes, sometimes upending social order or humiliating those in power. In some traditions, these tales reinforced moral norms by illustrating how liars ultimately faced punishment. In others, the deceitful being could be viewed with admiration, especially if the lies were wielded to topple an oppressive force. One might see parallels in many world mythologies. A disguised god emerges to test the hospitality of mortals. A cheeky animal figure outwits more physically imposing creatures. A disreputable but quick-witted scamp crosses boundaries between worlds. In each of these scenarios, the liar uses half-truths, illusions, or bold fabrications to achieve an end. The moral lessons gleaned can differ. Perhaps the story warns that deception, though powerful, inevitably leads to downfall if wielded excessively. Alternatively, it may imply that clever use of falsehood can unmask arrogance or bring forth growth. Modern society is heir to these ancestral narratives. Even in technologically advanced nations, fables of cunning animals or mischief-making spirits echo in children's media, cautionary tales, and entertainment. One legacy of this cultural heritage is the realization that lying, while often condemned, has long been a recognized tool in human affairs, simultaneously feared for its potential harm and revered for its imaginative potency. Long before the invention of mechanical devices, various harsh or mystical procedures were used in attempts to discern untruths. A suspect might be subjected to painful ordeals or forced to partake in elaborate rituals believed to reveal hidden guilt. Fervent belief in supernatural intervention led communities to assume that if an accused party were truly innocent, a deity or cosmic force would protect them during these ordeals. History records harrowing instances in which those subject to these trials were gravely harmed, casting doubt on the fairness or reliability of such methods. Later epochs saw the birth of more systematic approaches, such as the measuring of bodily responses, sometimes deemed to be under involuntary control. Known collectively as lie detection technologies, these instruments often focus on changes in breathing rate or skin conductance, hypothesizing that deceit triggers detectable physiological stress. Nonetheless, subsequent use cases revealed the flaws. Some individuals can mask these signs, while others who are entirely honest might exhibit stress for myriad reasons unrelated to lying. Courts in many societies have thus displayed caution or outright skepticism about allowing results from these tests as conclusive proof. Contemporary research increasingly looks at linguistic clues, observing the actual words and structures employed by a speaker, rather than relying purely on physical reactivity. The premise is that deception creates a type of mental tension that leads to unconscious shifts in communication. This does not mean that language-based detection is foolproof. Highly practiced or psychologically atypical liars might manipulate their speech with minimal hint of inconsistency. Nonetheless, for the average individual, especially in spontaneous or unplanned contexts, the subtle disruptions introduced by lying can be revealing. Why humans lie, motivations and psychological insight. Deception emerges from a range of motives. Some lies function to preserve self-image or stave off negative consequences. A student might fabricate a story about being ill to avoid explaining incomplete homework. An employee might exaggerate achievements to secure a competitive promotion. In these cases, fear of judgment or punishment often fuels the impulse to lie. By controlling the narrative, the liar aims to avoid blame or to gain an advantage. Another category of deceit is born from empathy, at least at first glance. People sometimes lie to protect loved ones from distressing truths. They might reassure a friend that a situation is better than it is, or omit details they believe would cause needless worry. There is an ongoing ethical debate about whether such half-truths or benevolent misdirections do more good or harm. Some argue that honesty fosters trust and allows for informed decisions, while others counter that shielding vulnerable individuals from harsh realities can be a compassionate act. Yet a separate dimension of lies arises in the form of deep-rooted or habitual dishonesty. Repetitive lying can morph into a habitual behavior, sometimes linked to personality disorders or past traumas. Individuals steeped in this pattern might feel that lying is their only way to navigate everyday demands without exposing themselves to shame or conflict. Others may even derive a sense of control or power by distorting the truth, enjoying the thrill of fooling those around them. In the most extreme circumstances, pathological deceit is part of a broader dysfunction, requiring therapeutic intervention. Philosophical perspectives: absolutism versus contextualism. Philosophers have approached lying through many lenses, often engaging in a lively debate about whether deception can ever be morally defensible. Some expound a stringent absolutism, maintaining that lying is categorically wrong under all circumstances. This position suggests that any deviation from truthfulness undermines the tacit social contract that makes human cooperation possible. If words lose their reliability, the fundamental basis for communication erodes. Others advance a more contextual or relativistic stance, claiming that lying might be justified under specific conditions. Perhaps a well-intentioned deceit thwarts a malicious act or protects an innocent person from a grave injustice. Such scenarios raise the question of whether certain moral rules, including the prohibition on lying, can be overruled by a higher principle, such as preserving life. Although the argument allows lying in dire or extraordinary cases, it does not necessarily condone casual or self-serving falsehoods. A wholly pragmatic view also appears in some texts that emphasize power dynamics and realpolitik. In that context, lying is regarded as one of many instruments a leader might use to maintain order or secure beneficial outcomes. Critics of this line of thought argue that it corrodes trust, making it difficult to forge genuine cooperation. Supporters claim that illusions, half-truths, or strategic misdirections might be required in a complex world where not every stakeholder acts ethically. Language patterns that reveal deceit. One of the more intriguing facets of lie detection is the way individuals subtly alter their speech when they deviate from the truth. Researchers in communications have highlighted a few recurring tendencies that appear more often in deceptive statements than in sincere ones. Removal of personal pronouns. Liars may unconsciously reduce references to I or me, instead relying on passive constructions or third-person usage, creating psychological distance from the falsehood. Greater use of negative language. A speaker weaving a falsehood might introduce more negative words or sentiments. This could manifest as complaining about irrelevant matters, inserting unpleasant descriptors, or generally allowing frustration to seep in. Some scholars link it to subconscious guilt. Simple yet overly polished narratives, fabricated stories, can sometimes sound suspiciously uncomplex, lacking the natural messiness or contradictory details often found in real events. At the same time, a liar may weave in excessive details about peripheral matters to lend plausibility, resulting in a strange contrast between an oversimplified main plot and bloated tangents. Inconsistency in emotional tone. The emotional arc that accompanies a truthful story tends to unfold with internal logic, especially if the event had a personal impact. A deceptive account might feature inconsistent or exaggerated emotional cues that do not align smoothly with the content of the story. Despite these patterns, it bears reiteration that language-based detection is probabilistic, not definitive. Some truth-tellers may, for instance, speak in an impersonal style due to shyness, or use negative language because they are genuinely upset. Still, for investigators, therapists, or everyday listeners, noting these shifts can be valuable in deciding when to probe further. Developing skills to spot dishonesty. As social beings, humans often pick up on cues, facial expressions, tone of voice, body posture, that suggest another individual is not being straightforward. However, relying on folk wisdom such as shifty eyes can be misleading. Eye contact avoidance may indeed appear in dishonest behavior, but it might also reflect social anxiety or cultural norms about respect. Similarly, fidgeting can point to either deception or simple nervousness, unrelated to any lie. Those seeking to refine their ability to detect falsehoods can approach the task holistically. Observe baseline behaviors. Before concluding, one should know how a person typically speaks, gestures, and phrases ideas in relaxed, truthful contexts. Subsequent changes may offer clues. Pay attention to details over time. Ask clarifying questions at intervals. If a story shifts significantly upon repetition or grows overly padded in ways that contradict earlier statements, suspicion arises. Remain aware of see the context. A small slip in body language or an unusual turn of phrase might not mean much on its own, but when convergent signs consistently point to possible deceit, the likelihood is stronger. Practice empathic listening. Paradoxically, an empathic stance, fully focusing on the speaker's words and emotional cues without immediate judgment, often yields deeper insight. A liar might feel compelled to elaborate untruths in ways that gradually reveal contradictions. It is crucial to maintain ethical caution. Overzealous suspicion can harm relationships or reputations, especially if an innocent person is wrongly labeled dishonest. Similarly, the process of lie detection should not become an excuse for paranoia or manipulative interrogation techniques that themselves breach trust. Undermining relationships and institutions. Even minor lies, repeated frequently, can seed long-term interpersonal conflict. Within a marriage or close friendship, discovering that a partner lied about finances, romantic involvements, or significant life decisions can trigger profound betrayal. This erosion of trust may linger for years, if not permanently. casting doubt on the authenticity of any future communication. Similarly, in professional environments, concealed mistakes or distorted performance metrics might temporarily protect an individual's image or promote them to a higher position. Over time, however, the organization risks a culture of suspicion and turf guarding that undermines collaboration. On a larger scale, entire institutions, government agencies, corporations, or media outlets may fall prey to systematic falsehood, whether motivated by profit, fear of scandal, or ideological goals. Institutional deceit festers in secrecy, sometimes for extended periods. Yet history shows many cases in which these falsehoods eventually come to light, prompting a crisis of confidence in the institution's leadership or mission. In a democratic context, repeated deception by elected representatives can breed cynicism among the electorate, weakening the bonds of civic participation and respect for governance. The educational mandate, teaching honesty. Educators, from early childhood guides to professors in advanced academia, often frame truth-telling as a cornerstone virtue. School settings introduce moral lessons through stories that show the harsh consequences of dishonesty and the esteem that follows honesty. Yet beyond moral exhortation, educators can adopt concrete exercises that develop critical thinking and a deeper understanding of truth in various domains. Some possibilities: analytical reading assignments. By encouraging learners to dissect articles and essays and noting potential biases or logical gaps, schools foster a habit of questioning and fact-checking. Debates on real or fictional cases. Group discussions in which students must argue either for or against a character's choice to lie can highlight ethical complexities. Participants gain empathy for the dilemmas that drive deception, even as they weigh the broader impact on trust. Role plays of difficult conversations. Learners can practice providing honest feedback in role-play scenarios, balancing compassion with clarity. This experience helps them see that truth need not be brutal or tactless. Media literacy projects. In an age dominated by social platforms, the ability to spot doctored images, misleading headlines, and conspiracy thinking is essential. Guiding students in evaluating source credibility prepares them to recognize falsehoods well beyond the classroom. Such initiatives strengthen an internalized appreciation for honesty, moving beyond simplistic "do not lie" admonitions into nuanced reasoning skills. Learners discover that truth, while sometimes uncomfortable or complex, enables more informed decision-making and healthier relationships. Personal strategies to avoid telling lies. It is one thing to bemoan the proliferation of dishonesty in the world. It is another to hold oneself accountable. Cultivating personal authenticity requires both practical steps and introspective self-awareness. Inventory one's stress points. Reflect on situations where lying feels most tempting. Some individuals lie in their professional roles out of fear of losing status. Others fib to relatives or friends when social obligations become overwhelming. Identifying these triggers helps a person proactively plan for a more truthful response. Rehearse honest explanations. In many scenarios, a gentle yet direct explanation can avert the need for creative deceit. For example, instead of citing an invented emergency to avoid a gathering, one can simply say, "I appreciate the invitation, but I need personal downtime." Seek support from accountability partners. Sharing the goal of honesty with a trusted friend, mentor, or therapist can lessen the difficulty of following through. Mutual encouragement and understanding can create a culture of openness within the relationship. Set boundaries rather than deceive. Often people lie because they feel pressured to share details or commit to events. Firm but respectful boundary setting can reduce the sense of entrapment. Stating, "I prefer not to talk about that aspect of my personal life," might be uncomfortable, but is ultimately more honest than weaving a cover story. Acknowledge mistakes candidly. When slip-ups occur, whether in professional projects or personal matters, admitting them early and taking responsibility can build credibility. While it may lead to short-term embarrassment, it prevents the accumulating stress of maintaining a false facade. Scholarly works on lying and honesty. Students of deception can explore a tapestry of books that dive into its many facets, from psychological experiments to in-depth case studies of famous scandals. Some authors concentrate on micro-expressions, minimalistic facial cues thought to flash on a person's face when they struggle to reconcile hidden feelings. Others analyze speech patterns in court transcripts or political addresses, mapping the linguistic footprints of evasion or denial. A separate group, informed by sociology, might emphasize how communal norms and power structures create a hospitable environment for falsehood to flourish. Readers wishing for a broad-based introduction can seek out volumes that blend anecdotal evidence with empirical research, offering tips and frameworks for everyday lie detection. In contrast, specialized academic monographs might tackle narrower aspects, such as how cultural norms mediate the line between polite discretion and outright lying, or how children's capacity for deception evolves with their cognitive development. Varying cultural attitudes toward deception. Truthfulness is rarely a one-size-fits-all concept across cultures. In some regions, directness and blunt honesty are prized, with the expectation that individuals say exactly what they mean. Critiques of others or negative feedback might be given openly, with minimal sugarcoating. In these communities, a lie, even one deemed minor, can be met with significant disapproval. By contrast, other cultures prioritize social harmony, favoring nuanced statements that avoid offense or confrontation. In those contexts, certain omissions or mild misrepresentations might be classified as kindness, not deceit. The aim is to preserve face and maintain cooperative relationships, especially in hierarchical social structures. Outsiders to these cultures may mistake such indirect communication as dishonest, while insiders may perceive it as a gesture of respect. Spiritual and religious teachings, similarly, offer varied stances. Many admonish followers to be scrupulously truthful, linking honesty to divine virtues. Yet theological traditions often acknowledge complex moral situations. Some teachings frame deception as permissible if it prevents greater harm, underscoring that each incident must be judged carefully. Such positions reflect the challenge of reconciling moral absolutes with a world rife with conflicts of duty. Exercises for detecting misinformation. Beyond interpersonal contexts, modern life demands discernment in the face of widespread digital content. A barrage of news updates, blog posts, op-eds, and social media commentary can make it challenging to separate genuine reporting from skewed narratives. Recognizing misinformation is itself a subset of lie detection. Some exercises can sharpen this skill. Cross-referencing news sources. Encourage the habit of verifying a sensational claim by consulting multiple reputable outlets or expert analyses. If a major story appears in only one questionable source, consider waiting for corroboration. Spotting emotional manipulation. Articles or posts aiming to exploit readers' outrage, fear, or triumph can sometimes rely on misleading headlines. A calmer, more balanced tone does not guarantee truthfulness, but hyperbolic emotional triggers should prompt heightened caution. Inspecting photographs and other media. With advanced editing software now widely accessible, images and videos can be deceptively altered. Checking for visual inconsistencies, like mismatched lighting or artifacts of sloppy editing, can reveal tampering. Tracing original reports. Social platforms often feature secondary or tertiary accounts of an incident. Attempting to find the original publication, interview, or research study reduces the risk of relying on rumors or out-of-context tidbits. Self-deception, the blind spot of honesty. Even more perplexing than lying to others is the phenomenon of lying to oneself. Psychology notes that human beings have a remarkable capacity to reshape or selectively filter their memories, feelings, and interpretations of events to maintain a comforting self-image. In times of failure, for instance, one might externalize blame entirely, convincing oneself that no personal mistakes were made. Alternatively, a person might persist in a relationship that is unhealthy, telling themselves that everything is fine or that the other party will change. Such self-deception might offer short-term relief, protecting the individual from feelings of inadequacy, guilt, or heartbreak. However, long-term costs include stunted emotional growth, a distorted perception of reality, and increased vulnerability to external manipulations. If one cannot face personal shortcomings or illusions, how can one differentiate truth from falsehood in the outside world? Indeed, self-deception stands at the heart of some of the most damaging forms of dishonesty, since it robs a person of the internal grounding necessary for genuine self-evaluation. Professional discourse around deceit. In certain domains, the ability to detect lies is professional bread and butter. Investigators, intelligence agents, and psychologists specializing in forensic contexts all aim to perfect nuanced methods of analysis. However, challenges abound. Some criminals show little remorse, bypassing guilt-related stress signals, while others might paradoxically exhibit strong emotional reactions despite speaking the truth due to fear or trauma. The professional's role is thus part art, part science, combining knowledge of psychological patterns with astute observation and carefully structured questioning. In business, many corporations strive for transparent ethics, cognizant that even well-concealed falsehoods might emerge one day, eroding brand value and trust. Governance bodies sometimes mandate audits and compliance checks to deter creative accounting or misleading public statements, yet corporate cover-ups still occur. Revelations of falsified test data or misrepresented financials can spark massive repercussions for employees, shareholders, and consumers. Some argue that embedding an honest culture from the executive suite down to frontline staff offers the best inoculation against such calamitous deceptions. Technological potential and pitfalls. Digital technologies hold promise for real-time linguistic analysis, theoretically sifting through emails, messages, or recorded conversations to flag potential lies based on word choice, phrasing patterns, or emotional undertones. Such a prospect provokes a storm of ethical debates. On one hand, an automated system able to highlight suspicious communications could help identify fraud or protect vulnerable groups from scams. On the other, it raises serious privacy concerns. Do we want an ever-present filter that monitors our words, potentially mislabeling jokes, metaphors, or cultural expressions as lies? Developers of these systems also face the challenge of bias. If an algorithm is trained primarily on data from one linguistic group or culture, it may incorrectly judge the communication style of another group as deceptive. The risk of false positives, especially among marginalized communities or non-native speakers, is significant. An over-reliance on technology might obscure the complexity of human communication and hamper the role of empathy and situational context in discerning truth. Illustrative public scandals. Large-scale deceptions in the public arena make for dramatic headlines. Past corporate schemes in various industries, in which unscrupulous executives masked true financial standings or buried adverse scientific findings, demonstrate how lies can take hold in organizational culture. When exposed, these scandals can lead to bankruptcies, widespread economic ruin, and even humanitarian crises if the deception involves critical safety or environmental risks. Political cover-ups also furnish cautionary tales. History includes instances of high-level leaders who assured citizens that no wrongdoing had taken place, only to be undone by overwhelming evidence to the contrary. Public trust, once violated, can be challenging to restore. Efforts to rebuild credibility might span years and require transparent disclosures, legal reforms, and leadership changes. In each of these examples, the question arises, were those at the helm of the deception themselves self-deluded? Did they truly believe in their justifications, or did they cynically decide that the facade would never crack? The intricacy of motivations can be staggering. Some conspirators rationalize their actions as necessary for a perceived greater good, while others simply desire to reap personal gains. Regardless, the fallout when lies are laid bare highlights the destructive ripple effects such dishonesty inflicts on entire communities. Personal consequences of unmasking lies. On a more intimate level, individuals who have concealed significant facts, perhaps major debts, hidden relationships, or fabricated accomplishments, often describe a paradoxical sense of both dread and relief when the truth emerges. The dread arises from fear of judgment, potential loss of relationships, or derailment of professional prospects. The relief stems from no longer having to maintain the exhausting mental choreography required to keep a lie in motion. For the deceived parties, reactions range from profound anger to a sense of confusion about what else might be untrue. Rebuilding trust in such contexts is a fragile process that demands consistent honesty thereafter, genuine atonement, and the willingness of all involved to address the underlying causes of the lie. While reconciliation is possible, it usually requires a long period of re-establishing credibility through tangible, demonstrable changes in behavior. Systemic deceit, entire networks of collusion. Beyond corporate or governmental incidents, systemic deceit can arise in any group dynamic where members face pressures to conform or protect a collective image. Academic circles, for instance, have suffered from cases in which research findings were fabricated or manipulated to align with funding interests or personal ambitions. Peers might remain silent if challenging the falsehood threatens their own standing or blocks future collaborations. Likewise, certain social or religious communities might discourage members from airing doubts about core tenets or leaders' conduct. This environment can foster a pervasive sense that some truths must never be spoken openly. In such atmospheres, maintaining appearances supplants open inquiry. Over time, the gulf between official claims and lived reality can widen dangerously, setting the stage for internal crises when suppressed truths leak out. Recognizing these patterns helps underscore that dishonest behavior is not merely an individual failing. It can reflect institutional structures, social norms, and collective fears. The remedy often requires courageous whistleblowing, cultural shifts in accountability, and leadership that values transparency above public relations gloss. Transcending lies in a digital era. The modern digital environment provides unprecedented opportunities for self-expression. It also encourages curated personas, partial disclosures, and illusions that might be mistaken for genuine truths. Social media users may present idealized versions of their lives, or propagate rumors without rigorous fact-checking. Online anonymity, at times, emboldens people to fabricate outlandish claims or adopt fictitious identities. This proliferation of illusions can cultivate cynicism in those who realize how easy it is to weaponize misinformation. Yet technology also empowers everyday citizens to fact-check in ways unthinkable in earlier centuries. Investigative journalists and civil society groups harness open-source tools, crowdsourced investigations, and instant global communication to expose hidden realities. The simultaneous presence of both advanced fabrication capabilities and sophisticated verification techniques forms a paradoxical landscape. Maintaining an ethos of honesty in such a climate demands not only vigilance, but also a willingness to refine one's standards of truth-telling in every interaction, whether digital or face-to-face. When white lies multiply. Small untruths, often spoken to avoid hurting someone's feelings or to smooth over an awkward situation, may seem innocuous, declining a friend's invitation by pretending to have another engagement, or exaggerating a compliment about a meal that was mediocre can feel like a kindness, but the habit of such small fibs can accumulate, silently teaching a person that lying is an acceptable shortcut whenever the truth is mildly uncomfortable. Over a lifetime, these small lies can expand into a pattern of avoidance. The speaker may lose practice in diplomatic but honest communication, resorting to falsehood as a default. Alternatively, they might develop self-justifications. Everyone fibs like this, it's not hurting anyone, or people prefer a sweet lie to a blunt truth. In reality, repeated mild dishonesty can degrade self-trust, leaving an individual unsure of their moral stance. It can also create subtle barriers with loved ones who might sense a lack of genuine expression. Admittedly, life sometimes requires a gentle approach. Truthfulness does not mandate rudeness or a total exposure of private feelings. It is possible to offer partial truths, set boundaries, or simply say less. The crucial element is ensuring that what is said remains aligned with reality so that the overall message does not intentionally mislead. In that sense, the art of telling the truth gracefully involves discernment, empathy, and a willingness to accept short-term discomfort for the sake of long-term integrity. Stages of life and varied deceptions. From the early years of childhood to the reflections of late adulthood, the kinds of lies told and the justifications behind them evolve. Children may lie out of fear of punishment or a fragile desire to be perceived as good. Teenagers, seeking autonomy and peer acceptance, might practice more deliberate deceit, shaping narratives that fit social or family expectations. A university student might lie about their past to impress new acquaintances, while a parent might conceal certain truths to provide reassurance to children. Adulthood brings its pressures. Workplace competition, relationship complexities, and financial responsibilities can pile up, making the lure of lies more pronounced. Some adults decide that full candor is ideal, yet find it challenging to live up to intense or complicated encounters. Others become adept at rationalizing dishonest tactics, especially if they interpret them as necessary for personal success. In later years, some individuals experience a reckoning. Tired of pretenses, they may embrace a more fearless honesty, finding relief in the freedom from illusions. Alternatively, they might carry on with entrenched patterns of insincerity, unwilling or unable to break habits long entrenched. Observers can find both cautionary and inspirational examples of how different life trajectories handle or mishandle honesty. Spiritual calls for truthfulness. Sacred texts from many religious traditions urge adherents to be forthright, linking truth to moral or spiritual purity. Some place truth-telling among core ethical commands, framing any lie as a spiritual transgression. Others acknowledge complicated moral terrain, allowing that lesser untruths might be justified to save an innocent life or prevent severe harm, a stance sometimes described as using a lesser evil to avert a greater one. In mystical or contemplative strands of various faiths, the emphasis often falls on aligning speech with a deeper sense of reality. Speech becomes a potent force, shaping relationships and the speaker's spiritual well-being. According to such teachings, the act of speaking truth fosters harmony with cosmic order, while deception seeds internal dissonance that distances the soul from enlightenment or divine connection. Mental health intersections. Persistent lying can erode an individual's psychological welfare, generating guilt, anxiety, or the stress of holding multiple contrived stories in mind. In certain clinical pictures, lying surfaces as a symptom or coping mechanism. For instance, a person dealing with intense social anxiety might lie to avoid gatherings, rationalizing it as necessary self-preservation. Another might embellish personal achievements to hide crippling self-doubt. Therapeutic interventions, whether individual or group-based, can address these underlying drivers. By exploring the emotions fueling deception, clients learn alternative ways to handle the triggers that once compelled them to lie. The process can be challenging, as confronting the truth about one's limitations or mistakes may be painfully vulnerable. Yet the reward is often a more stable sense of self, liberated from the constant worry of being caught in a lie. Fostering collective honesty. Nurturing a climate in which truth flourishes requires sustained effort across multiple fronts. Family life that encourages open communication, schools that teach critical thinking, workplaces that celebrate transparency, and public institutions that uphold rigorous accountability. Together, these structures anchor a culture of honesty. By contrast, if any part of this ecosystem rewards or tacitly endorses deceit, rot can spread. Reinforcing a culture of truth might involve open forum policies. Institutions can implement channels where members can safely report concerns or discrepancies without fear of retaliation. Whether at a company or a university, accessible whistleblower systems deter misconduct. Praise for integrity. Acknowledging employees, students, or citizens who choose the harder path of truth in difficult moments highlights the real-world benefits of honesty. Recognition and celebration can shift norms and demonstrate that sincerity is neither naive nor undervalued. Checks and balances. In governance, independent bodies and free media play a critical watchdog role. Transparency laws, independent auditing, and journalistic freedom all curb institutional temptations to lie by threatening exposure. Reflective rituals. Some communities or organizations adopt practices encouraging periodic self-examination. Group discussions, retreats, or even shared readings about honesty can open dialogue on moral dilemmas, preventing complacency. Illuminating fiction and reality through literature. Novels and plays often dramatize lies, exploring their destructive or redemptive impacts. A well-crafted narrative about a character undone by deception can leave lasting impressions about the perils of falsehood. Meanwhile, works that celebrate truth-telling heroes affirm the belief that sincerity stands as a core virtue. Outside fiction, memoirs, and investigative non-fiction detail real episodes where hidden truths came to light, exposing wrongdoing or sparking reform. Students of literature might examine how a protagonist's gradual entanglement in lies mirrors psychological theories regarding cognitive dissonance or repressed guilt. Others may look at how certain authors employ unreliable narrators, using the first-person perspective of a liar to keep readers questioning every statement. Such literary devices show the complexity of deception and how it can engage an audience on intellectual and emotional levels by playing with the line between fact and fabrication. Case studies in business, politics, and beyond. Multiple industries have weathered deception-based crises. There have been documented situations of falsified emission data, manipulated test results, or inflated product claims that eventually unleashed scandals. In political spheres, cover-ups of misconduct, covert operations, or financial improprieties have led to resignations and reshaped public debate. Even in charitable and non-governmental organizations, misrepresentations about how funds are used can shatter donor trust, unraveling years of philanthropic progress. In analyzing these events, observers often note that the short-term gains from deception pale in comparison to the eventual long-term destruction of credibility. Indeed, once the public perceives that a leading institution or figure has lied, anger and skepticism overshadow accomplishments that might otherwise have been lauded. Rebuilding goodwill can require profound structural and leadership changes, combined with ongoing transparency about reformed practices. Personal recovery from revealed deceptions. For the individual liar, the moment of exposure, though traumatic, can prove transformative. While the immediate fallout may include broken ties and professional setbacks, candid confrontation of the root cause behind the falsehood can launch a healing process. The path forward might involve apologizing to those harmed, seeking counseling, and committing to a different standard of honesty. In some cases, faith communities or support groups provide frameworks for atonement and a fresh start. For the deceived, a spectrum of emotional processing unfolds, Anger and disbelief might first arise, followed by sadness or self-doubt about not recognizing the lie sooner. Over time, some move toward forgiveness, acknowledging human frailty and trusting in demonstrations of changed behavior. Others cannot bridge the breach, opting for a clean break from the individual or institution that broke faith. Both resolutions underscore the potent effect lies can have on forging or shattering bonds. The entangled web of systemic lies. When deceit becomes ingrained in a broad social or institutional structure, unraveling it demands collective effort. One person blowing the whistle may face intimidation from peers or superiors determined to protect the status quo. Even if the evidence is compelling, entrenched power dynamics can stifle reforms, at least temporarily. Nonetheless, history suggests that resolute truth-seekers sometimes manage to bring about substantial change by rallying public attention or enlisting allies in oversight bodies. The resistance that whistleblowers face reveals that cultural norms can be complicit in preserving illusions. Employees might prefer not to lose comfortable routines. Devotees of a charismatic leader might dismiss negative revelations as fabrications. By shedding light on how entire networks collaborate, either actively or passively, in supporting deceit, researchers highlight the difficulty of achieving transparency. They also hint at the remarkable courage displayed by those who break the cycle. Truth in an age of data overload. Modern society grapples with a glut of data. Unending feeds of social media, micro-targeted ads, streaming commentary, and near-infinite online archives. Within this massive flow, countless bits of information are inaccurate, incomplete, or distorted. Navigating such an environment requires both critical literacy and an ethos that values honest discourse. If individuals approach online interactions with the same care they might show in face-to-face communication, verifying facts before sharing, labeling speculation as such, and owning errors when discovered, digital spaces might become less susceptible to rumors and manipulative hoaxes. This ethic, however, conflicts with the desire for quick confirmations of one's biases. Many succumb to the temptation of confirming headlines that align with pre-existing beliefs. Self-deception re-enters the equation, as individuals might prefer comforting lies over inconvenient truths. Maintaining vigilance against such impulses means regularly questioning one's assumptions and acknowledging that the truth is not always easy to confirm. Illusions in love and economics. A further lens through which we might consider deception is the realm of love and relationships, where romantic illusions can blur reality. Partners might delude themselves about fundamental incompatibilities, choosing to emphasize an idealized vision instead of confronting genuine issues, from statements of unconditional devotion that mask unresolved resentments to grand but insincere promises about the future. Such illusions can prolong relationships that lack honesty at their core. When the facade eventually shatters, both individuals are left with a sense of betrayal, confusion, and a backlog of unresolved conflict. Economic illusions can similarly steer entire markets or personal financial decisions. Investors might inflate the potential of a fledgling enterprise, whether deliberately or under a sincere but misguided optimism. Shrewd marketers sometimes capitalize on the human tendency to see what one wishes to see. Consumers invest in products that promise miraculous results or place faith in pyramid-like schemes that collapse once enough people recognize their structural unsustainability. The line between a hopeful forecast and a deceptive pitch can be thin, leading to devastating crashes if illusions are allowed to spiral unchecked. Though the arenas of love and economics differ in emotional tone, they both show how deception can breed dependencies and maintain illusions that stave off immediate discomfort. A couple might stay together due to the comforting lie that everything is fine, just as a buyer might continue to pour resources into a shaky investment out of denial or an unwillingness to accept losses. The aftermath of such illusions, once they fail, underscores that facing difficult truths early can save significant emotional, psychological, or financial costs in the long run. Illusions in conflict and propaganda. Warfare and geopolitical conflicts provide yet another vista of collective and institutionalized deception. Propaganda campaigns, which distort information to mold public opinion, have existed as long as rivalries between nations. In some cases, entire populations have been persuaded of the righteousness of a cause through carefully orchestrated illusions, demonizing opponents via selective imagery or fabricated atrocities. Meanwhile, governments under pressure to maintain morale may omit unflattering data about battlefield losses or resource shortages, painting a false picture of imminent victory. Historically, individuals who uncovered discrepancies between official announcements and lived reality might face accusations of disloyalty. Only years later, through documentation or eyewitness accounts, do broader swaths of the public learn the scale of misinformation perpetrated in the name of national unity. This cycle highlights how powerful deception becomes when tied to patriotism, fear, or communal pride. Propaganda capitalizes on emotional responses, stifling critical thought by casting dissent as betrayal. Modern digital networks amplify these dynamics, enabling rumors and outright falsehoods to circulate widely in a matter of minutes. The challenge grows. How can one remain informed and alert without succumbing to paranoid suspicion of every communication? This dilemma echoes again and again, reminding us that truth is not guaranteed to triumph without active, sustained efforts to protect it. Tying the threads together. Dishonesty thrives in murky conditions, whether on a personal level, where fear, shame, or ambition drives a person to fabricate stories, or on a collective plane, where entire institutions mask flaws to preserve reputations. The seductive pull of lying stems from a belief that illusion can offer a more favorable outcome than reality. Yet illusions often demand ongoing maintenance, risking a collapse that causes even more significant harm once exposed. Examining lies through psychology, we see how anxiety and self-preservation push many to obscure the truth. Turning to philosophy, we engage in deep debates over whether lying is ever permissible as a means to a nobler end, or if sincerity stands above all else as a guiding value. Exploring cultural variations and spiritual teachings, we recognize the wide but intricate patterns by which societies attempt to delineate acceptable from unacceptable deception. Meanwhile, language-based approaches open new doors to decoding how subtle transformations in speech and writing might reveal hidden guilt or conflict. Educational efforts in analytical reading, critical thinking, and ethical discourse aim to raise future generations better prepared to detect and repel the contagion of lying. On a personal front, individuals committed to honesty can institute reflection and accountability in their daily lives, learning to face discomfort without retreating into fabricated tales. In a world often fogged by half-truths and deliberate misdirections, striving for honesty becomes a beacon of clarity. Though lying may appear to solve immediate problems, spare someone's feelings, secure a promotion, avert punishment, it frequently exacts a steep toll on one's inner equilibrium and outer relationships. The tangle of perpetuating a lie can lead to stress, guilt, and the potential for explosive fallout if the mask slips. Entire organizations, even entire nations, have witnessed the social and economic collapse that accompanies unmasked deception. By appreciating the historical and cultural significance of falsehood, we grasp why it remains so persistent. Myths show its ambiguous appeal, legal codes have tried to root it out, and philosophical traditions debate its moral status. Nevertheless, research into linguistic signals and psychological patterns suggests we are not powerless to sense when we are being fooled, nor are we unable to examine our motives and refrain from crossing that threshold into deception ourselves. Each effort to uphold truth, even in minor daily matters, serves as a stitch in the social fabric, reinforcing a shared belief that words can still carry real meaning. At its core, honesty asks a fundamental question. Do we value authenticity enough to weather the vulnerability it brings? If the answer is yes, then the challenging but ultimately uplifting journey of consistent truthfulness becomes possible. We create space for genuine connection, collaborative problem-solving, and mutual respect. Over the long sweep of history, illusions, no matter how grand, tend to fade, yet truths, however inconvenient, anchor progress. By embracing truth on an individual and collective scale, we harness a potent force for emotional well-being, moral integrity, and communal trust.